Seeking life-changing knowledge? You've stepped into the right place. Welcome to Bold Perspectives with Samantha Postman. In every episode, discover, explore, and grow your personal or professional self with real and relevant knowledge to help you improve your own life and make a positive impact in the world around you. Tune in for honest insights, life advice, inspirational wisdom, and the occasional salty rants. Because you are meant to live a better and bolder life.
Hey everyone, it's Samantha Postman with the Bold Perspectives podcast. We've got a treat for you today. We cover quite a bit of ground and a variety of subjects. What we talk about today is being in the public and the bandwidth that requires to put yourself out there. As well as we talk about generational splits and the catalyst behind it, what happened in the education system, as well as what it looks like with generational splitting and segregation in our culture today. And from there, which is somewhat related, we have a salty rant about the education system and the generational splitting that's going on. And the last part of the show, we're going to talk about something that I get asked a lot about, and it's on my website. I talk about having 10D vision, and I'm going to tell you where that came from and what that all means related to photography and more. So join us today, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hey everyone, it's Samantha Postman with the Bold Perspectives podcast, and we have a treat for you on today's show. We have Dave Kimbell. We know each other from a community called Ship 30 for 30, where we're in a challenge where we write for 30 days essays and we post on Twitter. It's been really cool. We've both grown through this. If you're interested in doing anything where you're going to meet great community, get to expand your network while building your writing, totally recommend it. But interestingly enough, Dave happens to be a copywriter. So he's reinventing himself right now. He is an engineer by first trade, used to work in the UK for about 20 years and has just come back to Canada and has kind of doing his, what we all want to do is get that, let's just remake myself and try something different stage. So yeah, Dave, welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. That's a very good bio and intro of me. That puts me quite accurately. Yeah, that's right. Engineer, aeronautical and mechanical engineer and systems engineer for 30 years now, reinventing myself as a copywriter and consultant. So yeah, I'm living in Ottawa, Canada. Yeah.
Ottawa, yeah. Well, I'm glad to have you here today. This is not like the normal podcast, like what people think a podcast is going to be. And I like to flip the script a little bit, but this time flip the script is where the guest asks me questions. So usually it goes the other way around, and I hope you don't all flame me up in the comments that say, hey, you're supposed to let the guest talk. That's not this show. So if you want to hear the guest talk, you got to go phone him up yourself and talk to him directly. Our show today is Dave reached out to me and said, hey, I noticed some things you've written online and I really want to talk some more about it. Would you be able to have some time where we get on a chat? And I was like, sweet, sounds great. Sounds interesting. I got a podcast show. Are you up for this? What I do is kind of Joe Rogan style, but he calls it Samantha Postman style. And we will use your, those questions you had that brought you to me that wanted you to, whatever it is you wanted to ask me, or use those as our guiding posts. And then from there, I'm like, I hope David's okay. But then from there, it's just like, on the fly rabbit trail, because that's like where the sweet stuff happens. So that's what you're getting. None of this is rehearsed. We have no scripts. The only thing we had is a couple of questions that started the reason for our connection today, and the rest of it is just going to be we don't know what it's going to be. But then when you all hear this, I'll have a recording and it's going to tell you what you're going to hear. So yeah, I look forward to the show. And Dave, I'm so glad you're here with us today.
Me too.
This show is turning out a lot different than I thought. The first ones I recorded are me solo at the beginning. I knew I was always going to interview people or have people on the show or something, but I wasn't sure what that was going to look like. And I wasn't like, I didn't have a solid plan for that yet. And then out of the blue, two communities I've been in the Rome research community now with the book club, and now with Ship 30 for 30. And I'm getting requests for interviews like, hey, I'd love to talk to you about this, or I'd love to talk to you about that. And they're different. And so the show is turning into a little bit more of a, hey, can we just pick your mind and let's just talk for a little while about whatever it is that drew you to wanting to talk? And I'm loving this format. So it may be my thing. Maybe it's like sort of like Ask Sam, which sounds really, it seems a little narcissistic. So I'm really having trouble with that.
I'll tell you what, I've got a client. I think that's normal and maybe even healthy. I have a client that I've been working for since Christmas. She's basically a coach, or she started off as a coach in the decluttering space.
Right.
And she has taken off. I mean, she's doing 6 digits easily. I don't know the precise numbers, but she's doing very well. And she has a whole cadre of women, largely women, that she's helping, who just think she's God. Can't say enough good things about her.
Right.
While she's got a great camera presence, she's, understandably, she's normally humble and modest, and this actually makes her rather uncomfortable. And what I've been trying to tell her says, look, this is what these women want. So just be God for them for a little while. Anyway. And she gets that, but it's not easy.
Yeah, I think that we're meant to live in the tension, and that's where the beautiful life happens. I was talking to Casey Lee a few weeks ago. She was interviewing me about why I wanted to do a podcast. She's got this cool app to help podcasters just make it easier for them to get their voice out. And we were talking about like living in the tension, and something that when I mentor young adults, they're all about we prefer black and white. That's what we're taught from a very young age, black or white, it's this or that. It's this political party or that political party. It's you're left-winged or right-winged. You're for women or you're against women. You're for, it's for against black and white. And I'm like, but life isn't really like that. And we do have all, if we want to use light and dark, but as a photographer, I get to see something different. One, there's all shades of light. There's all shades of dark. But when is the most beautiful time of day?
Early morning.
And early evening, when there's when there is no black. It's not all night, and it's all not all day. It's not all black and it's not all white. And that's where the beauty is when you can like navigate that. That's the part that's beautiful. And that's where we're meant to live. Trying to shoot for that sunrise, trying to shoot for that sunset.
That sounds very similar to Jordan Peterson's line. I don't know if you've ever watched much Jordan Peterson, but he talks about the yin and the yang, chaos and order. And he said where the ideal place to live is right on the boundary between the two. So yeah,
that's a beautiful picture. And that's when I was talking about it. That's what reminds me, because I think we see the black and the white because they're predominant in a yin and yang, and we see that symbol a lot, but it's a symbol of balance, and it's a symbol of the beautiful line in the middle, but it's not what the human eye is trained to see. We're trained to see where the majority sits, on the white side or the black side. Our eye is not trained to see that little sliver in the middle where the beautiful part is.
Do you know why that is? I don't, I'm asking.
Well, I mean, if I was to venture some guesses, I would say because we're as humans, it's a tribal thing to try to be where the group is. So if we feel like the group that we're around is white, and I don't really like using black and white because of the racial issues of white and black people. So I'm not talking about it in a race perspective. But just because we're using the yin and the yang and using dark and light. I think that, we gravitate to our tribe and so it's the majority, and then average, right? Like we're all just trying to be a little above average, to be honest, or even just average. And so that just creates a majority because most people will just kind of settle there. Right. So I think that that's part of it. Also, it just takes up a lot more vision space. I mean, look at the day. Look, the day takes up way more space than the sunrise or the sunset. That's just a tiny sliver. So we think about the whole day because it's predominantly part of our day, our 24-hour clock. So it's just, I think it's just a human condition. Some people, I think creatives are trained to look at the middle. Like they can see in black and white, they acknowledge it, but they choose to be that middle part where they see see what's the tension between the two, the beautiful parts. And that's why I think there's a whole thing out there right now, like 1% creator economy or something like that. That's exactly it.
Wow. Okay.
And I haven't read any of this. I'm just, this is just kind of off of how I observe people and humans in the world, I suppose.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I'm sort of living in that by without realizing it. I think I guess I haven't done a lot of thinking about it, which is why I asked the question. I have been trying. I do tend to listen. I try very hard to listen to perspectives that are totally different from mine, and to befriend and hang out with people who are as different from me as possible. Just because I'm aware that I probably gravitate unconsciously to one side or the other. And I can only see the world through these two eyes. That's not going to give me a balanced perspective. The only way I'm going to get anything close to a balanced perspective is by mixing it up with people who see from completely different angles. And I guess that's sort of where I think of as straddling the border between order and chaos. And I don't know how well I'm doing it. I just find myself drawn to people who have a very, very different opinion on stuff, and can express it not too emotionally. We can't avoid being irrational, but we can, if people are striving to express their point of view from a rational perspective. Okay. They've experienced that. Okay, well then I can see why they'd sort of conclude that. I'm not sure I agree still, but I can definitely, if I was in their shoes, I probably would think exactly like that. And it forces me to reevaluate my own perspective, and not be and get away from any kind of dogma that I might possibly be drifting towards.
Right.
I adopt probably a libertarian, which most people would probably label as right-wing, extremely right-wing perspective on a lot of things. I don't think it is actually right-wing. I think it's just libertarian, but I'm aware that I might have stuff wrong.
Well, so I think you just touched on something there that I think is important to think of us on continuums as opposed to on sides. So like if you're, I lean towards a libertarian side says a different thing than I'm a libertarian. You've just said I'm white or I'm black, but instead of saying I'm leaning, it's like saying I'm on a continuum. And depending on, like for me, when I say it that way, what I'm really meaning is I may be a little bit more egalitarian on one side and more libertarian on another side, but it depends on what we're talking about. It's not a camp where I'm like, okay, here's my principles and it's yes or no based on those principles.
Yeah.
It's a continuum, and I may be in a different spot on each one. It's like that Myers-Briggs. They put you on a continuum. Well, you could be an E all the way on one side and a T all the way on the other side, but in the end, you become somewhat balanced. So I think that I really dislike labels a lot. I will use them because it's a metaphor people understand, and you can make your point very quickly with a label.
Yeah.
They can be really good. Like I will use labels when I'm really hoping someone will step into them. And that's when we should be using labels, but they're not the kind that everyone thinks. It's more like you have potential, you have courage, you have kindness, I see this in you, I see that in you. Those are really good times to use labels. Anyway, sorry, you just got me up a little bit. And then one more thing. I got a little passionate about that. I get a little edgy when people pick like I'm this and I'm that. So
I get it. I don't like labels either. It's interesting. The labels you just picked are not really, they're not names like, kind, compassionate. They're adjectives.
Yeah. But I think you can use them for labels.
Yeah. Yeah. They're better ones. I think labels, most of the time when I hear them used, they're used as a shortcut. I need to be able to figure you out as quickly as possible because I don't want to spend the time trying to figure out who you really are. That takes too many years. I want to be able to categorize you so that I can go back to sleep. Thanks very much. And if
You
you
know,
can give me what
though,
those labels are, then I can do that.
but it can be very effective. What you made me think of is, like, if I meet a fellow Christian, I will often ask them what denomination they worship at. I don't usually, or, I don't really say, I won't really give the label, are you a Baptist or a Protestant or a Catholic? I don't use those words. I'm like, where do you choose to worship is often what I'll say, and then I can figure it out by the name. But I will use that because it really helps me understand very quickly the most likely, predictability, the most likely way they're going to interact with me. And so that will help me be gentler where I need to be, or it will help me phrase things or reframe things in a way that will make it easier for them to communicate with me back and forth. So those are times I find that very, very helpful. So like, I know you read on my website that I was a tax expert for many years. And so, I never really thought of it like that, but like I'm looking at T4s, T5, so T4s are employment slips. So where they worked, which will tell me, are you a plumber? Are you an electrician? Are you a pastor? Are you like, that's sort of a label. I get to see where they donate to, if they do. So that's going to tell me something about them. What kind of investments they have. Are you a safe person? Are you in treasuries and GICs getting guaranteed income certificates with a set interest rate? Or are you playing the mutual funds and you're getting it in Canada T3s, which are used for those kind of investments? That tells me something about you. So those things really, really help me pick up. I until we talked, I didn't really realize that each of those things told me something about someone very quickly. But after doing them for so many years, it's just muscle memory, right? So you start to ask people a couple of questions and it can help you really quickly just kind of get a sense of them, I suppose. But I still try to stay away from labels.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an ongoing struggle. It's because we're barraged by so much information.
We have to learn how to process it quickly. The Germans were like amazing for categorization. Look what they could, they were hammering out manufacturing, and they were just like, they're machines, right? Generally speaking, historically. And so that's because they have a quick categorization process. It makes it very easy to, yes or no, where does this go? How does it go? How do we log it? How do we find it back? So, there's a value in it. I think, I don't know where you are in a faith level, but like when I talk to people about traveling, they sometimes say to me, what do you like about traveling? And I am so fascinated with meeting new people, especially from different cultures. It's just something that I've loved since I was really little. So this is, I did a master's, actually. I have a seminary degree. I did that when I was 40. And it was during that time that I started really thinking about like what it is I love about traveling. But then I realized that what I love is that when I meet people, like in the Bible, it says that we're made in Christ's image. So if we're made in God's image, so if we're image bearers, then that must mean we must represent his attributes. Well, of course, no one person, race, or country can have all of them in one. So when I travel the world, I think of it like getting to experience different versions of God. So like we were just talking about God, we were just talking about Germans. I'll let you sit on that for a second.
Well, that's funny. I've last several weeks, I've been reading through Charles Hannell's Law of Attraction, and he actually uses very similar language. It's almost mathematical. The master key system. That's it.
Okay.
Charles Hannell's master key system. He was Charles Hannell, Hannel. He was one of a group of sort of new thought thinkers. I think that's what they call themselves, as new thought, about a century ago. And out of that spawned the sort of the original law of attraction literature. But he actually uses very similar language to what you just described. If you think of God as a whole, or think of him as a mathematical function. I don't know how much math you know. If you remember your calculus, high school calculus, did you get into that at all?
I took calculus.
Yeah. Okay. You differentiate a function. Okay. You're basically chopping the function up into tiny little bits. Well, that's what we are. were tiny little bits of the God function. Integrate them all together and you have the whole.
Right.
Now, I don't think the whole human that saying the whole human race all equals God. No. But that's effectively what you do, is when you integrate all the little bits of DX together, or dy dx together. That's how you start to get a bigger picture of the whole. That's the kind of language that he uses in there. So
it's exactly how I would envision if I was to use mathematical metaphors or a visualization. Sometimes I actually do use mathematical, but I don't always. I forgot that you're an engineer, so I could have done that with you.
Oh yeah.
I think in math a lot, or like mathematical concepts, I suppose, or yeah, that's the way I would see it. So when I go and meet a people of a particular nation, and in general, there's certain attributes about them. So when we were talking about the Germans, their ability to be categorized very quickly and just be super efficient. And I see that as, an attribute of God, something that we would see in him. And then when I go down, like when I see the Africans dance, with everything in them, they're vibrant and beautiful. And the color, like white people aren't even allowed to wear color like that. I don't know what it is with us white people, but seriously, we could take some lessons from the Africans. It is so beautiful. They're like beautiful flowers and beautiful nature, flaming reds. They're poppies and tulips and, bell. Oh my gosh. I look at them and I think vibrancy. And then you see them dance. And I'm just like, that's an expression of God. And I get to see that when I'm around them, or when I get to see, I've never been to Africa in this particular case, but I get to see it on television, which is pretty cool. Or I have some friends that are Africans. And I travel south quite a bit with the Latin Americans. And so, every time I come in contact with people, I'm going to call them, I feel like I get to experience an extra version of God. And so I love that. And it's like a treasure hunt or something like that.
I've got a question I've got to ask.
All right.
The essay you posted a couple of weeks ago on MeToo.
Okay.
I'm real. What caught me about that was an impression that I didn't know was happening. And I'm just wondering, how did you discover that?
Well, I'm female, so that gives me an extra sure. eye on things. Okay, so just so people have
you experienced it just since the Me Too thing has happened?
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, I'm just going to back up a little bit for people who are listening so they know what we're talking about. So the week of April 15th-ish, I posted an essay on my Twitter. That's actually how Dave and I met. We've both been doing this. It's called Ship 30 for 30 essay challenge. You write for 30 days and post it on Twitter. It's absolutely phenomenal. I would recommend it to anyone. I honestly, unless your marriage is in trouble, don't do it. It will not. I'm not joking. My husband told me he thinks I'm having an affair with Apple because he just sees me on the computer on my tablet. And then we used to cuddle in the morning. And then that was kind of our time before day gets busy. But I get up really early now so I can get my essay in the morning. So he's definitely not a cheerleading this one. So that was like a little side note. So that's how we met. 15th day. Before that, I just kind of wrote. I wrote a little bit, some fun stuff, some embarrassing stuff, just stories, a little bit more story-ish. And then I started to build up the courage. And then on the 15th day, I wrote an essay.
The Me Too movement cheats women from essential mentorship.
Yeah, it's the name of the essay. And how I entered it is, we're seeing the Me Too backlash across all organization types. Women are being cheated from essential mentorship that sharpens skills and advancement and organizational movement, creating a monster that both men and women are afraid to talk about. And then in this article, I unpack what I say is the glass ceiling getting thicker, or perhaps another glass ceiling that's replaced the old one. And that because of the Me Too backlash, and strongly because of the Billy Graham and Pence movement, which is super admirable at the time. And what their movement is their policy was no eat, no meat, and no travel with a woman alone. But then what has happened is now all of a sudden women I don't get to be at that meeting, at that table, at that travel, with the travel, but someone has to go with them. So it's males. So males are getting an edge over females when it comes to mentorship. And in the article, I chose to use the word mentorship I've been asked, actually, interestingly enough, quite a few times why I chose that angle, because you probably guessed this, that this is a larger implication than just mentorship. But that's how I chose to approach it. So from there, so now that you're kind of all on page of what happened here, also that article I posted on LinkedIn, and it hit the top one of the top 1%.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, for that day. So got quite a bit of interaction with it. And I don't have a lot of connections on there. So I don't keep my LinkedIn up too much, because there's quite a bit of cold calling going on in there. So, but anyway, so Dave, I'll shoot it back to you. So what is it that you wanted to ask about that particular article that I wrote?
I'm just curious how you discovered this. I mean, had you been,
Yes.
I think you mentioned that you mentor a lot of young people.
Mm-hmm.
So was it them telling you this is what's happening?
Just a little back up a little bit. How did I do? I noticed a lot of things, Dave. Like, I honestly might write about 6 essays to be delivered when I die, like stuff that I noticed about the culture that I don't know if I'd be brave enough to speak out loud. And this was kind of, I have a skill with noticing things. I'm a noticer. Sure. I'm the master of noticer. I notice things, or something just feels different for me for some reason. And then I'm like, why? Why does that feel different? What's going on? Why are people acting different? Why are they saying what they're doing? How is this affecting people? And then I think, I ask, I research, I watch, I keep it in the back of my mind and watch for more. And then that's kind of how this happened. To be honest, I was in Costa Rica when the MeToo movement happened, crazy enough, sitting at a table in a hostel. And I actually think it was during Hurricane Nate. So barely any Wi-Fi. It was a crazy experience, honestly. With a bunch of 18 to 30-year-olds in candlelight, and they're like, what's this MeToo movement happening and what's going on? And so I remember being down there going, wow, the world just shook. And I was in the middle of a storm. So the world was shaking where I was. Like, there were people died. It was a terrible storm when I was down there. And I remember, but the thing is, most people didn't know this was already starting. That was like, people think that just, they don't know, but that was happening 1 to 2 years before already. It just wasn't so vocal. So the year before Me Too, almost a year to the date, I was in Ecuador doing some consulting work for 30 ministry agents. They do relief work with, relief work with women who've been battered. They do earthquake relief. They do young adult mentoring. They work in the schools to try to help, students graduate and go on and make a great life for themselves. They offer English lessons. It's really great stuff they do. And I was down there, and they were already, so this is a year before Me Too, and they already were starting to have to change the doors so that there was glass on all the doors. And that was like one of my first inklings to that there's a serious problem coming down. They were changing all the doors where there was a male that was normally behind the door. They had to put glass on so that any clients that came or coworkers, anyone can see what's going on in that office at all times.
Right.
So they had to change. And these are agencies that don't have a lot of money, but they're worried about their reputation. There's the Billy Hybels scandal, oh my gosh, like that just, the ripple effect of that is unbelievable. But even if he did or didn't do it, it's the question that got there and what happened. I mean, that pretty much toppled that enterprise on a dime. And nobody else wants that to happen to the organization. So people were already being proactive before the Me Too. So when I was in Ecuador, they're changing the doors to glass or taking doors off. Policies were already changing, and this was a year before. So I started to see it, and I thought, I wonder what's going to happen with this as we go along, and my heart was breaking, because a lot of times for a woman and a pastor, there's nowhere else she can go to talk. And that was a safe place to talk to a man. And honestly, I try not to get too emotional because my autoimmune kind of flares up, but I didn't have a lot of good men in my life. And to be honest, to have a pastor that I can trust to go to, like a solid, wholesome man, that I wouldn't have anything like that in my life. I don't think you understand like what that is to a woman, to be able to have a male who is stable and gentle and going to listen and safe. And all of a sudden we're telling the whole world that person might not be safe anymore. You have no safe place to go. There's nowhere safe for women right now. I'm telling you that. Unless they want to go to a women's agency, there isn't very few places that women can go and talk to males safely anymore. I kind of got a little off track. That wasn't just about Me Too. That was just me being upset about what's going on and what's happening.
It's all part of the whole.
It's the whole thing, the ripple effect, the ramifications of what's happening with these scandals that are coming out, which are very minor. They're just made huge because the media just loves them, right? But there's so few, really. I mean, I wish they'd publish how many leaders there are and then how many of those scandals actually happen. It'd probably like 0.0. I don't know what the percentage would be, but it'd be very tiny.
I think it's very small, but it seems like close to 100%.
Well, they say the tail wags the dog, right? So you've got this minority, you know, this maybe that's a bad metaphor, but like this small thing, smaller thing. It's not small. It's smaller when you look at the good of the entities. When you look at the good of organizations, you look at the good of the nonprofits, what they're doing for good in the world is needed. I mean, just look at our world. The more love we can have, the better. But these scandals are shutting the good ones down, even without the scandals in them. And they're shutting their doors down. And yet, I'm sorry, but I'm upset. I'm upset that women have nowhere to go. Like even a lot of pastors won't even counsel anymore for insurance reasons. They're just like, yeah, you need to go to a professional counselor, which a lot of people aren't going to do.
Can't afford it. Can't find one that they trust.
So our vulnerable are becoming more vulnerable. So then where do they go? Ideally, they're going to hopefully go to a nonprofit organization if they can get there. And it's not always safe for, anyway, that's complicated. However, those are getting shut down and those are getting handcuffed now too. So what we need is women preaching to women. Well, how are women going to get mentored if it's all the men in leadership? And do you have any idea what that puts on a woman? Like the requests I get to mentor women, I can only mentor so many women and be good at what I do. Because if I'm mentoring all those women, I'm not in the workplace right now, but like, let's just say they'd be like, well, wait a minute, Samantha, you're not making your quota. You're not doing a good job. Well, yeah, because I'm mentoring all the women.
We've only got 24/7.
Well, how am I supposed to get moved up? So we're not talking just about nonprofit organizations, but we're talking about corporate world. So lack of mentorship also means lack of ability to build my skills. So then when promotion time comes, all of a sudden I haven't been, I'm going to use the word groomed. I don't love the word, but I haven't been groomed to take on that new position because I haven't been invested in because I'm a female. So the guy who can go to eating and meeting and traveling is going to be eligible and he's going to be more qualified. So when they're like, well, I hired the most qualified person. Of course you did. He was the most qualified, but you know, he had way more opportunities than I did. So now sometimes when I bring this up, some companies are starting to go, okay, well, wait a minute, this shouldn't be unfair for both. If we can't do it for women, we're not going to do it for men either. Well, that sucks too. Why should men not have an opportunity for the best? Yeah, it's like we can, oh my gosh. And then I'm so angry I have boys. I don't want them to be passed over because of some rules that we have to make the same for men and women.
I have been curious what it looks like from the female perspective in the workplace.
So think about what it's like in universities and post-secondary schools. So if you've got a female who's a master's student taking a master's or a PhD and she gets matched up with a faculty member, more than likely the faculty member is going to be a male. So then what happens when these MeToo these MeToo things come in, and they already are, and now all of a sudden she can't meet him after office hours anymore, even on university campus. There has to be 2 or 3 people on staff at the same time. So now all of a sudden, now she's not going to get the same education because you can't meet after hours or, when there's not enough staff available. And the other thing too, is it just all implies, the whole thing implies that both are going in with ill intentions, right? It's like,
guilty before proven innocent.
Right. And then what are we saying? We're saying to women, well, I should feel this way because society says that this is normal for me to just want to be with him. And society says the other thing to the guy. Men tell me things that they tell me things like, they're like, you know what, Samantha, one of my biggest fears is that I'm going to get wrongly accused of sexual misconduct. And I'm like, these are business owners, people who own practices, people who own firms. And they're telling me that their biggest fear is getting wrongly accused.
And it does happen.
It does, but even that's so minor. I'm not like,
oh yeah.
My first reaction,
it's very minor, but it's just enough. It's just the threat of it happening is enough to make them think that way. Yeah.
Right. And because of the power of social media, they have a good reason to be, because even in that case, it's guilty till proven innocent.
Yeah.
And most of those are not false accusations, I would say. It's interesting because it's not as easy as people think. Like, a woman is dragged through the mud 500 million times over and back if she makes that kind of accusation. Very unlikely. It's not too often that those have nothing founded, even if they're not as vivid as maybe they're accounted for. But there was something going on, even if it's just an energy or something. But still, it's this distrust, and I feel like when a guy tells me that, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I feel for you. And then the female me and is like, why would you think that a woman would do that to you? Like, you don't trust us? And so I'm fighting with myself because I'm feeling so much compassion for him. And at the same time, I'm just like, wait a minute, what does that say?
Yeah, it's hard to avoid taking it personally. I can see it from his perspective.
I totally can. And that's not a way to operate. That's not a way, like,
it's gonna force the world to split in two. And then 4 and then 8, because it's more than just male, female. It's bad. Yeah.
Yeah. And I am normally, I generally don't go and speak out about things unless I feel like I have some plausible solutions. That's not my style. I think there's a lot of people who can point out problems in the world, and there's a certain amount of intelligence that you need to be able to point a problem out. But to me, that's the easy part. It's what can we do to solve this? What can we do to move towards a non-problem, even if it's not a total solution? But in this case, I'm not in the corporate world very much anymore. And I'm just not in a place. It's funny because Alex, I don't know how you say his name, Iglesia.
Yep.
Iglesia. Okay, Alex Iglesia. I think he mentioned that, well, maybe Samantha, this is for you to seed and let other people to grow. And I thought that was interesting because he used a farming analogy, probably on purpose. And, my husband, I manage a farm. And so as soon as he said that, I'm like, yeah, but I think for farmers, it's hard because we plant, we fertilize, we take care of it. I mean, God comes along and puts the sun there and the rain, but we take care of it from start to finish, all the way to harvest. And I didn't really think about it till he said it. And I was like, maybe that's why it's hard for me. I always think like I got to stay in the whole time. But I don't. Sometimes it's okay to plant and let other people take it from there. The harvest doesn't have to be ours.
It almost definitely won't be.
Right.
It's somewhere in the Bible where it's one. Well, I plant, you reap. I forget exactly where it is and what it says. It's there. So yeah.
So I'm not sure where this is going to go, and I don't know that I answered anything for you. I definitely got quite a few DMs, some comments on there, and someone wrote me a message like, they wrote, WTF, this is actually happening, and I had no idea, and they were so angry. And I'm definitely where I am right now. I'm not trying to make anyone angry. I'm just trying to build awareness, but I am a little bit angry about some stuff. Yeah, but I wasn't trying to make everyone else angry.
I'm almost scared to reply.
Well, you know what? Because this is going to be live, it may not, that's something that you should take some time to think about and not necessarily just say.
I am scared to reply because of where I think I think I do speak for a lot of men in this regard. I'm scared to say anything.
Yeah.
Because the moment I open my mouth, I'm afraid there's going to be somebody who says, you shut up. You don't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know? And just about all men right now, I think, are just thinking, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'm just not even going to play.
I'm going to challenge you on that one, because I had the most interaction with men which was really hard. It was just amazing. It really touched my heart.
But I would be willing to bet they didn't tell you everything they were thinking.
Some did. I got some DMs. There's probably more to the stories.
Okay.
LinkedIn, I got a couple too. I saw this in my workplace and this is what happened. I'm a little nervous about that. I definitely don't want my inbox flooding, because this isn't my hill to die on. I have a limited life, and this isn't my hill to die on, I guess. So I definitely don't want to get pulled in the conversation too much, or where it takes over my entire life.
Yeah.
I think that also goes for women, by the way, because it's funny because I did a mind map of of this whole thing, like an overarching thing. It's not just this Me Too, there's other stuff too. So I did a mind map, kind of mapped out this overarching thing that's just gnawing at me inside, and then just started popping things over. So the Me Too, mat leave, like all these kinds of things that I'm seeing. And then I broke off of some branches and I put male and female. Like, why is no one saying anything, or why aren't they saying anything? And then the male, some of what you said came up. But I think for women, it's like, because I mean, Me Too is needed in many ways. It really, a lot of good came out of it. However, I'm a female, and so I got to hold the female flag and do everything that the females do. It's kind of like the black and the white thing, right? And so it's just like, if I say this went too far, there's a negative repercussion happening here. I call it the MeToo Monster that has emerged. I gave it a name. I named the thing and said, this is a MeToo Monster. And I know in the Me Too movement, a MeToo Monster is a guy who's actually sexually assaulted someone, but I'm like, I didn't know that when I wrote the Me Too Monster. And I think we can. Either. No, I didn't know that either, but not until I used the hashtag and all this stuff came up. But, a bunch of people who are just, that's their campaign. They were hurt really badly. And the more we speak up about something, the more we own it, the more we're not going to move off of our line. And when somebody else, a female, comes up and I'm supposed to be like, towing the party line and waving the flag. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not okay with all of this. Well, now all of a sudden, like, I betrayed the women. I'm going to call it a race, because it becomes almost.
You let down the sisterhood. How dare you?
You let down the sisterhood, and what you let down the brotherhood. Dude, don't speak. And the brotherhood is stronger than the sisterhood, by the way. That's why a lot of this stuff went under the table, because all these male boards shoveled stuff under the table, but women are a little less that way. They're a little less sisterhood-ish, but it's still there. I
would dispute that.
Yeah, it probably depends on where you are and what it is you're talking about, I suppose. That, we both can do it. I think it depends on what you're talking about. But for women, it's hard. Like, I don't want to betray the sisterhood, for sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, like there is a lot of pressure. But I'm not in the corporate world, particularly right now with COVID. I'm like everybody else, reinventing myself in some ways, which I was already doing before. So, and because I felt like I was betraying the confidence of some people in the executive world and nonprofit organizations that were telling me things. And I felt like if I spoke up, they think I was betraying their confidence. But, a year
with the MeToo essay.
Well, just, yeah, when I write things on there, because I'm like, well, this is happening in this organization and this organization and this organization. We all think when someone goes and publicly posts something, we all think they're talking about us, even if they're not. And so I just didn't want them to be like, I told you that in confidence. But now a year's gone by, and I think the world has changed, and I've changed. I've grown bolder, and I want to see what's best for everyone. And I know that doesn't always work, and that's just some ideal world that maybe that isn't ever going to happen. But we can definitely strive to be better. It's never going to be perfect, because every time you solve a problem, there's another problem that pops right back up. It reminds me, do you remember that, like, was it like a guacamole thing? What do you call that?
Whack-a-mole.
It's like you get the mole down and then 3 more pop up.
Yeah.
And like, that's kind of what happened with me too. It's like, boom, you're down, man.
There's quite an analogy with life in that one. Yes.
And then it's like 2 more moles popped up. Yeah. It's like, okay, we got to whack those ones. But I think life is in the just keep whacking them down and just going. Like, the minute we stop, moles all just pop right back up again. But there's always going to be a mole.
Only now the moles that pop up are wielding weapons.
Yeah.
And it seems like they're wielding weapons, and they're happy to wield them, not just against you, but against people that are close to you. So suddenly you're not the only one who suffers if you say something. Other people are going to suffer because of it. That's the different story. I didn't buy into that. That's what we're thinking. No, I think I'll just keep my mouth shut, or at least so my brain tends to operate. If I'm afraid I'm going to start an argument unbeknownst to me, then I just go, whoa, no. Rightly or wrongly. Maybe it's wrongly.
Well, and that can have a lot to do with not just, also can be a marriage. Because like in my particular case, I'm much more outspoken than my husband. He's more of a, let's be unified and work together and, keep our head down. And I mean, he will do what's right, but he's not one to make a ripple about it. He'll just do it on his own, right? He sets a good example. He's definitely more like this. And he's not I can say this. So he's got Dutch heritage. I know this is live and I hope I'm not going to regret this when he hears this. He knows I talk about it, but I may regret it.
I'll email him later and tell him what you said.
No, he'll probably be listening to it at some point. But like, he's been here over 100 years, but what happens is people will still act like they're, whatever their heritage is. It permeates down generations, whether you think it or not. It's just in Canada, we put the stamp on and we're like, last made in Canada. I'm Canadian. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's quite what you are, like on a passport. Yeah. But, anyway. And so there's a reason why the Netherlands was an occupied country. They didn't join the Germans, but they didn't fight them either. They know how to be in the middle and they do it well. They did what's right. They didn't join, but they're not ones to just stand up and fight about it either. That's part of who they are.
The Dutch Empire, for lack of a better term, was far smaller than either the British or the French or any of the others. Yeah.
They would immigrate and move, but they're not conquerors per se in generally speaking. And so hey, you know what? I don't know if you know this, but I'm German background, I'm British background, I'm Scottish background, and I'm Irish. And so I'm always either taking over the world, fighting for my country.
Yeah.
And I'm adventuring to go and conquer new lands and discover the world all at the same time. So our personalities are quite different. And so what you talk about, like when it's like, should we speak or not? Sometimes it's like, okay, is this going to cause ripples in my own marriage? Because for him, his path is to just do the right thing and just live his way right, well, and let the rest of the world do what they are. And I'm more likely to just step in and try to steer that a little bit. So sometimes when we speak or don't speak, these happen. I mean, over history, if you imagine how many things were not said or fought simply because a spouse wasn't okay with something, and how things did happen. I mean, some people, like, there were some really great things, especially like what happened in the UK, with ending Black slavery. People literally, gave up their marriages to make that work. When you fight something, it takes everything.
I didn't know that.
There's anytime you see someone who has really, really changed the world, they used to say beside every great man is a great woman. There's that saying. Yeah, because the sacrifice, what you just said, affects your family, affects who people talk about you, how they talk about you, how they approach you. It literally dictates your life.
Becomes your marriage almost.
It's the life, and some people don't always choose it. Sometimes your destiny chooses you, I suppose, but you always can say no. So yeah, sometimes when we speak up, is this good for my marriage?
Yeah. And
my husband's pretty supportive. Still, I'm definitely a firecracker in comparison.
Not a good thing in a barn.
What? That could be fun. If you just have only I would think so. You can get those ones that don't like really light anything on fire, can't you?
Probably. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Anyway, I just kind of went. And the funny thing is, you and I were talking a little bit about, because when you emailed me and said, hey, I'd love to have a conversation with you. And I'm like, sounds great. What do you want to talk about? And this sounds awesome. Sounds like a lot of fun. Want to be on my show. And I said to you, we're going to submit, what are the reasons why you wanted to talk? And then from there, it's just rabbit trails, because when you talk in the rabbit trails, is where a lot of the sweet stuff happens. And I don't they're not always rabbit trails, but let your minds flow. And I said to you, it's Joe Rogan style. And after talking to me, you probably see that now.
Oh yeah. Well, I think I detected that earlier. I figured this was going to be it was not going to be dull. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Yeah. And
who wants dull?
yeah. So I was talking to my kids the other night. They're all young adults now, and they were over visiting, and I was telling them about this. I was telling them about our interview coming up and that you had reached out to me partially because of this Me Too. And I was telling them about it. And yeah, my oldest son, he's very well thought. And he's just like, yeah, these are the things that, people have to navigate, and you can do everything the right way and think you're saying it with the best heart, but, are you ready? And what I really wondered was, I was talking to a psychiatrist in Scotland, and when people talk to you, something I've noticed about them is often they're talking to themselves.
Oh yeah.
Even if it's just a percentage.
So
when he said to me, have you thought about this, this, and this? I mean, obviously we're all selfish people. We're always looking at things from our own perspective. So it's very revealing what people ask you. And when he said this, I was like, oh, but how is this going to affect you? I need to really think about that. When I speak, how is this going to affect my kids? How is it going to affect a future job opportunity? How is it going to affect, it's a question. It adds bandwidth to it. And I think that the more stuff you worry about what everyone's going to think or say, how it's going to affect in the future, the less you speak. Not just because it filters you, but you just don't have the bandwidth. This is so overwhelming. It's like someone puts a whole cover on you.
Yeah. And but you also don't want to see the pain in the people you love.
Yeah. My kids are pretty strong.
If the comeback lands on them instead of you.
Yeah. And I'm only around for so long. So, what are you going to leave them? So I think in many ways it's a little less of an issue in the younger generation because they're not all defined by their parents anymore, like it was, 50 or 100 years ago. You couldn't really shake your family tree off that very easily. But now it's a lot easier too.
100 years ago, I don't think they did talk about things like baby boomers versus Generation X versus Generation Y versus Generation Z. Mm-hmm. Because there wasn't that kind of divide. It's possibly because the world just wasn't changing so fast.
I have a theory. Why else? I'm curious. Why else do you think that happened?
I'm not sure. I want to hear your theory first.
Because now you're.
No, because I really am. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm just trying to think. There was a lot of technology changing 100 years ago, starting to take off. The other thing that was happening is government. Mm-hmm. The influence of government, which had up to that point been comparatively steady, suddenly started to ramp up. I mean, 100 years ago, we didn't have income tax, it had only just been introduced in the UK. Anyway, I'm not sure about Canada.
I think it was 1817 or something like that in Canada, somewhere around there. So probably close.
Okay. When income taxes were introduced, they were frequently, they were like 1%, 2%, and then they were repealed. Yeah. All of a sudden, after it was around about the First World War, when we were seeing, there was starting to see a lot of people killed in the war, so that there was a huge war effort that was expensive, and there was this sudden sense that we shouldn't be making old people drop dead on the factory floor, so we should raise some money to make sure that they got at least a couple of years to be sick before they die. And all of a sudden taxation starts to creep up. That has an influence. Now, how does that all mix together? I'm not sure. What's your theory?
Yeah, well, you added on to a little bit. So whenever I see something really change in a society, I think that there's societal, we need to look at society. What's different about society? What's different about culture? And I think you're already on that way, government. I think instrumentally, when it comes to like separation of ages, I personally believe that's happened when we started school systems, because now we segregated ages into age groups. So first we started with the one-room schoolhouses, which, to be honest, I actually went to a one-room schoolhouse. Yeah, you can believe it. I lived in Montana for a little while, and we were in the middle of nowhere, and like, no joke, a little one-room schoolroom. There was a bar and a school, and that's it. And then 25 miles to the next town. And yeah, the teacher lived on the premise, 12 grades in one class, in one little tiny room, like one little like room. Anyway, so yeah, I've been in that. that's a different environment completely, because like when something got graded, it would go to the next grade, he would go to the next grade. So like, you know, when you see Little House on the Prairie, like that was basically what my schoolhouse looked like. And yeah, you just pass it back. And so, but it somewhat modeled what the home looked like. We had all different ages together, but even still, there was a segregation of children from adults. Before that, especially when you look at, you know, settlements and tribal, there was never a separation between generations. We didn't have seniors living in a home. We didn't have babies going to baby care. You know, we had everybody, every generation was always mixed. There was no divisions. I mean, they didn't even keep birth dates. How long have people been doing birth dates? If you come from Africa and you meet somebody whose birthday is January 1st, it's because their birth date wasn't logged. There's no birth date logged. There was no age logged.
And it wasn't even important.
It wasn't important. But now we have this system. We have all these systems. We have governments. You know, of course, we can look at the East, who are super good at categorizing things, categorize people in schools. Well, now what we've done is we've gone and put all the kids who are 5 years old together, all the kids who are 6 years old together, all the kids who are 7 years old together, and then we put those and grouped them together and said, you from this age, you're together. You are a group. And you are moving from here to here, together.
And we will educate you as if you are all exactly the same as each other.
Right. But if you think of like, when I think about elementary, I think of 1 to 6. Well, that's a range of people. So that range of people is now X age now. Those are my people. We never did that before. That was never a thing. It's like school has lots of great things about it. This one really gets at me is like, as a personal experience, I feel the most insecure when I'm around my peers, female women around my age. I feel so insecure. I will self-hate. I will think there's everything wrong with me. My marriage isn't good enough. My kids aren't good enough. I'm not educated enough. Even I don't like think about that all the time, but it definitely is. I have to work at it. I have to work through those feelings and diffuse them. I'm not like completely obsessed with that and have a bad image, but like I have to diffuse them. It's an energy. When I'm with young adults, there's not even a millisecond of thought that goes into a comparative. It's full on relationship. I have the same thing when I'm sitting with a senior, full on relationship. And what we've done is we've put billions of kids in a schoolroom with just their grade and their peers. And we wonder why they have insecurity or they have anxiety and depression. I mean, there's a lot more reasons from that. But like we've literally put them with their peers all day long. How good is that for your mental wellness?
I agree with you. I think there's an additional element to it, is that you're forced into an environment with your peers, which gives you ample opportunity to compare yourself, to stack yourself up against your peers. And the pecking order gets established.
Yeah.
Of course, in the schoolroom, there'll be one pecking order. It'll be academic. Out on the playground, there'll be a whole different one, generally proportional to how big people are.
Yeah.
And what their athletic prowess is. But even in the schoolroom, there's an additional dynamic, that is, you all have to kowtow to this adult, whom you didn't choose. It was assigned to you. He or she was
isn't
assigned
related to you, isn't a blood relative or a tribe relative.
Right. Yeah. So the adult has very little to lose by any kind of misbehavior or
they don't have the same stake. Yeah.
Right. They don't have a stake. Then they may not have the competence either.
Right.
And the kids are put in this position, and they basically, it's a no-win situation, which I think is partly what exacerbates the competitiveness between kids, is that they're desperately looking to find some way to win. That's not healthy. I look back to my own school years, and I there's very little positive memory there at all.
And look what we've done. We've created 13 years where we put them in a prison and said, you have to stay here. And we're going to shove tons of information into your brain. You're going to like perform for us like a circus animal. When I say up, you put your paw up and, put it down. You can't make up your own tricks. And I know we're oversimplifying because I have some teacher friends who are just absolutely magnificent, and I had a few who made my world. So, you know, I'm not, but we're generalizing, which can be dangerous, I know. But I don't think it's in the child's best interest to be with only their peer group. And I'll give you an example of that really got on my heart. Is a friend of mine, her daughter definitely has trouble fitting in at school. She's quieter, just shyer, and not as articulate as some kids probably. And my friend, of course, is what I hear all these moms say: I want my daughter to fit in, or my child. I want my child to fit in. So I signed them up for volleyball. Okay, this daughter was definitely not athletic, and she had no desire to be athletic. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did you do? I mean, all it's going to do is make her feel worse. and what I really wanted to,
desperate.
I didn't say this, but you have no idea. I really just wanted to hug her and say, sweetie, can you just take your daughter down to the senior home and get her knitting with all the grannies? Because I promise you, that girl is going to blossom under those ladies, and she is going to feel amazing about herself. And she's not going to care about those kids at school anymore. And when she doesn't care, then all of a sudden they won't care and they'll like her even more. That's why I just wanted to shake her and say, please take her down to the senior home and teach her some knitting with the grannies. Yeah. But I did it because I didn't have the courage. I was just like, oh, that's nice. I hope it works out for you.
It's not a healthy environment. And I was put through it. I put my kids through it because I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
Seth, I don't know if you've, Seth Godin?
Yeah.
Okay. He published something 10 or so years ago, which was a real severe critique of the public school system. He was thinking the U.S. Particularly, but I think it applies probably through most of the Western world anyway. And it was beautifully entitled. It was called "Stop Stealing Dreams."
I know.
And in there, he argued there was really only two things that a school should be doing that possibly can't happen in the family home. And I thought these were brilliant. The two of them were lead. And the other one was solve interesting problems.
Yeah.
If you can equip, and that doesn't take very long to get to motivate kids to do that. If you figure out a really interesting problem, then you can lead in that problem. But bang, solved. And then the kid can basically educate themselves. And when I read that, my heart sort of sank, because by then I knew it was too late for my own kids. They were already well into secondary school, and there was no point. That was not a boat that I could turn around in midstream.
In an idealistic world, I mean, I just about cried when you said that. So I'm for you. I'm with you with that. However, the world is not, most kids are not able to learn those other things at home anymore. We've got tons of single parent homes who are working. By the time they get home, they don't have the energy to be teaching those things. And often many of them weren't taught by anyone else to do them. So they don't know how to, like budgeting. Oh my gosh. Like, we don't even teach our kids budgeting in school, but they're not getting it at home. So I think that in the world we live in, that's just, maybe that it needs to be an integrated part of the education system. But I'd rather see the education system move a little bit more towards life skills. Because when you look at education to begin with, I mean, it was a half day. It wasn't a full day. It was a half day. And then they worked at home or around their family for the rest of the day. So they were learning how to cook. They were learning how to chop wood and how things work with how the world works. Life skills. Yeah. But now that we put them in school all day, they're exhausted by the time they get home. Their parents are exhausted, and they're not getting the life skills anymore. And they're in every sport. So what life skills are they actually getting? So school has literally ate up all the time where they earned life skills, learned them and earned them, and not actually put that into the school system during the time that they took away from them. So when I lived in Ecuador, what was really cool is such a smart thing to do. But see, when you don't have money, you get to be resourceful. Yeah. But they used one school for three different segments of school. Early morning was elementary, middle day was junior high, and in the evening was the senior high. One school.
Now that's clever, because the teenagers, of course, don't wake up quickly. So putting them in the afternoon makes a lot of sense.
Well, they went later in the day. So
Yeah.
you can imagine at Christmas, I was there during Christmas in one of the main cities, Loja, and I was downtown, and there's quite a few schools, but the band practice was going practically all day from like 7 in the morning to like, because they were all practicing for the Christmas plays. And then, so there's band in all of them. And so elementary has to band practice all day, and then the junior highs come and they're band practicing all day, and then the high schoolers came and they're band practicing all day. Their whole time. I mean, so yeah, it was a lot.
And this was top quality music to listen to, of course.
Well, and it's, there's all this street noise. I didn't mind it because I love hearing life. I do get noise overload, and I did bring some earplugs so I could just tune it out. But you know what? If it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't have really noticed what happened. I was like, wait a minute, why are they, because I'm a noticer. I'm like, wait a minute, why is the band going from some crazy hour in the morning till some crazy hour at night? Then I found out it's because they use the same school, one physical school, and they just rotate the kids. But what's really cool about that is that, so in the morning, when the young ones go, then you've got your middle agers and older agers. But a lot of them are, it's, in Ecuador, you've got these mini communities within the city. So, I mean, the city is like 6 times my city. I live 100,000, but we drive all the way to the other side to go to Costco, but they don't do that. They do all their hairdressing and their tailor and their shoes and all of that are kind of within little sub communities within walking distance.
Right.
And so, and a lot of them own little shops, traditional style, where the home is the shop and everything like that. And so when I saw what the school system is, you always have a child who's at home helping out because they're not all at school at the same time. You've got, so the older ones can help in the morning. And then in the evening, parents are usually not so busy, so they can take care of the little ones at home. And in midday, there's usually, like when they come home middle of the day, depending on how the age of your kids. And you have to remember that they use cousins and everything. It's not like us where we're only using siblings because they all live really close. It's cousins and neighbors and whatever. You've got different ranges of age. So the childcare is kind of built in. So if you're running a mom and papa shop, you've got different ages of kids not home at different times. So not all the kids are gone at the same time. So this need for babysitting or childcare doesn't really exist. And a lot of them are both working. They don't need it. And the cool thing is that the young adult or the older ones, right, the high schoolers, they get to be at home during the day learning those life skills, but they get to be in the shop. They get to be learning like what it's, they get to learn the trade, which is what used to happen in the old days. People were learning their parents' trade.
It's far healthier.
It is. That's what's given my kids an advantage because we run a farm and there's no separation. I don't know if you know what farm life is like, but your home life is not separate from your work life. It's all one thing.
My brother-in-law is a dairy farmer, so we're around there. Work never really stops, never really starts. It's
just
work.
It's just one life. It's a life. Yeah. We don't really even call it work. I guess we call it work, but it's, I'm farming right now or whatever. But something that give my kids an edge over other kids is our kitchen table crosses as a boardroom. Yeah. How many kids have their entire childhood brought up where you're talking return on investments? We're managing employees, we're managing, shipping loads going in and out, we're new technology. I mean, it's literally business school for how many years? And then I have some friends, part of like a leader impact, and they'll be like, oh, I keep my work and my work and my home separate. I'm like, you should be talking about your work at home. Talk about what you do, why you do it, what you like about it, what kind of jobs you're working on, because your kids are going to pick all that up. It's extra education.
I agree. I got gypped of all that. I was raised by a civil servant scientist father who couldn't. He wasn't allowed. He knew he had, because it was all military, so he couldn't really talk about work much when he came home at all. There was occasionally he'd let slip a few things, and he'd say, "Don't repeat that."
Yeah.
But still, I never really got to see what he did. I had to learn, myself the hard way when I finally hit the work world in my 20s as well. But no, I got gypped of all that, and I think I'm probably more typical of most people in that regard.
And but most people just don't do it because, I mean, the culture is ask your child what they did at school. It's all about your child, your friend, their friends, their everything. It's all child focused.
Yeah.
And there is value in that, but we've gone overboard. And even like I have a separate business and my kids sometimes will say to me, Mom, don't talk about your business when we go camping. And I'm like, have you ever told Dad never to talk about farming when we're camping? No, never. But what my work is separate. And I have like some serious finance skills and I didn't really pass them on to my kids because, well, farming took up a lot of discussion and in a roundabout way, I did pass some of it on, but like really hard skills, I didn't. And some of it was because it was like, well, don't talk about your work here. Well, we should be talking about our work here.
Yep. Because it's all part of their life skills, really.
Well, it's educating them. And those little ones are a version of you. And they may not look like you even, but they're going to think a bit like you simply by being in your home. So it's much easier to teach them because you can generally speak to them in a shared language and a shared body language. So it's gonna be really easy and it's gonna be easy for them to pick it up. In a way, it's like picking up a language from a parent. They're gonna pick up so many cues that they just wouldn't even be able to pick up in a school simply because you guys are speaking a shared language. And I'm talking the full language, metaphors, all of that. So anyway, I tell my exec friends, if we ever talk, I'm like, hey, you should be like taking your, I have some friends that are architects, go take your drawings out, put it on the table and be like, I've been looking at this at work. Get your little one on, start them young, get them on your knee, just start pointing things out and they get familiar with them and it becomes muscle memory and they don't even know it. It just feels familiar.
Oh man, I wish I'd had that.
Yeah, well, now we're speaking. So anyone who's listening out there, if this makes an impact on you and changes your life, please DM Dave Kimbell or me on our Twitter because we'd love to hear if this made a difference. Because if our conversation can be the difference that someone's like, wait a minute, I need to do that. And they start doing this with their kids. Like, look how many people we could impact just by having this conversation and saying it out loud.
Yep.
Sweet. All right. What else do you have for me?
What's 10D?
I almost spit my water out. A friend of mine actually coined that. So someone I've done some work for, client and a friend, that happens sometimes. And it's just kind of interesting. I was doing some work for her with, I really love working with people who have like in-home businesses and just seeing how their workflow is and their family life and then just helping them get a good workflow. And she was launching a brand new online product because of COVID. She couldn't have people physically present as much. And she just trying to figure out what to do. So we were working through this. And I'm like adding in family elements and marketing and like, different generations. And then 2 seconds later, I'm like, we're talking about something else. And then I'm like, oh, let's change your SEO. And by the way, she got a $15,000 client the next morning. We changed her SEO at 8:00 at night and she got a $15,000 client the next morning by changing.
And you can attribute that to the SEO?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know SEO. I understand the premise of it. But I went and looked at hers and I was just like, wait a minute, these aren't words that other people use. You're using industry words.
SEO doesn't usually take effect that quickly. But that's interesting. It
was in the evening. Yeah, but we put it on her, like her main description on her website. The one that shows up like on Google.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So I guess that's still SEO. And I was just like, you're using industry words. If I was searching for this is what I think your clients would look for. And so we changed the words. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like talking about some special grant that she can use on her accounting because, I'm a tax expert. And so she was like, just looking at me at the table and she's like, some people see the world in 5D, Samantha, but you see the world in like 10D. Okay. She goes, it is like amazing. It's like you can flip so fast between people and personalities and roles. And she's like, and then you see the world because I feel people. And so I'm like, I can like emotionally, I guess, connect with a person that I think might be with them and emotionally connect with who I think that they might be gravitating towards for customers or whatever. Anyway, so this was something she coined. So she's like, it was a compliment. Of course, it was beautiful. When she said
I get it. As soon as you tell that story, I understand it. And I believe it. So,
well, and what's funny, she said it right after this because she's got some online offerings now and they were like online offering and the 1 month package and blah, blah, blah. And she has this one, she's been running for quite a few years. And I was like, we need to name the package. And she's like, okay, what do we name it? And I couldn't think of the word. You know how you got a word on the tip of your tongue and you just can't think of it?
Yes.
And so I'm like, oh, I know what to do, because I know this is what I do. I just got up and started pacing her living room. So I'm pacing her living room and I'm like, okay, we're talking about this. And I'm like, boom, signature series. This is your signature series package. And that's the one she booked the next day, $15,000.
Wow.
And I just got up and just like, I knew that I just needed to think, and I knew that it would come. So I just walked the room, and I'm talking. And she's listening to where all my brain's going. And I'm just like, yeah, it's something that you've done really well. It's something that lots of clients talk about. It's the most referrals. It's something, And then I'm like, boom, I know the word is now. So
my brain will do that, but it'll usually be overnight.
Yeah, things do come later too. So that's where it came from. But there's a kind of a funny story about that, because my podcast is called Bold Perspectives, but originally it was actually called, Inspire HDR. Yeah, see the look on your face is exactly why I didn't use it. Okay. I went to Podetize, who's producing my podcast, and did an opening interview, and they're like, okay, what's the name? And I told them this, and they're like, okay, what's that about? And I was like, oh, okay. So I'll tell you what it is, and then you'll see why I use 10D now instead of HDR. So HDR is high dynamic range. I used to be a professional photographer for a period of time, and in photography, there's HDR photography. Okay. So it's for any of you who don't know what HDR is, photography is, it's when you take a picture, you take a photograph in multiple exposures. So like, for example, I might take 8 exposure. I'm going to overexpose it. So it's going to be almost all white. The photo will be almost all white, because what I'm doing is getting all the details of the white. See, this is why I see in more color, because I'm a photographer. So the whites all have little variances in them. So you overexpose to get all the variances. And then you do levels of that all the way to underexposed, where the image is almost completely black. So in the middle is going to be what your normal picture would look like. It's what we call like the gray tones are evened out. So in HDR photography, what we do is we take all those 8 pictures, we take 8 photos and all those different exposure levels. So all the lights to all the way dark and everything in between. And then we sandwich them together to create a really vibrant photo.
High dynamic range.
High dynamic range. So if you were to look at a rock, normally when you look at a photograph of a rock, you're going to see the light on the top, and on the bottom, you're going to see a lot of black, right? Because the sun only goes on a certain part of the rock. But in an HDR photo, you will see all the color and details and all the crevices of the black under the rock where the sun isn't, because I've taken all those exposures. So when I say that I see the world in HDR, what I'm saying is I see all those little details, all the little colors in the darks, and I see them in the light. That's how I see the world, I guess. That's how I describe it to people. So when I say HDR, all I'm really saying is, I'm trying to inspire people to look for the details in the light, look for the details in the dark, and see all everything in between. It's depth and vibrancy.
It's a skill I wish I probably do have. Maybe just not visually. Okay, I see.
But it's not just visual for me. I sense people. I see people. It's more than just a visual. That's just the only way I can explain it when I use HDR.
Sure.
So
no, I understand where you're going. I probably function that way auditorially, just because I'm an amateur musician.
Right.
I'm always.
It's like an intuition of depth or something.
And an intuition of where, in my case, I can sense where the music's about to go.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, okay.
So it's sort of that. So I like to inspire. It just as a little side note, HDR, when you look at an HDR photo, it's overstimulating for most people. There's just too much information for us to process. So like, I get that. I'm too much information for people. I overload people. My brain overloads because there's just so much information. And a photograph, an HDR photograph, is too much information. Humans like to see a black with no details in it, because it's just too much to process in one photo. To see all the details in every single thing is too much. It's overloading. And it almost looks cartoonish in a way. Like if you look at an HDR photograph, it has a cartoonish look to it. It can. Now, a really good HDR, a really good photographer will do that and then just have it like really blended lightly, so you don't really notice that it's HDR. And so then when you'll see details, but it doesn't look overdone. You wouldn't really know the photographer does that. It's pretty clever. Because you can blend different things. I could just take a normal photo, just take the photo on regular, I guess, if you want to call it that, and then do one that way, and then blend them together, and then just make the one that's really vibrant and over with all the information, and just have it, let's say 10%.
Yeah.
So then it would just give your normal photo just a little extra.
Okay.
Like giving it texture. It'd be like giving it a slight amount of texture that is enough that people would go, huh, but not without them going, okay, there's something more with that. Does that make sense?
And so you do that, you apply that to just about everything, I expect, but you certainly, the photography bit you've done, you're a farm wife and manager, and you're a tax strategist as well, or you've been a tax strategist as well.
Mm-hmm. You've
been around them, and you mentor kids.
Young adults, mostly. Not as much right now, but I have done quite a bit in the past. My children are young adults right now, so most of my energy is going into them specifically right now.
Yeah. Okay. Holy cow, you've had an interesting life, and it wasn't off to a great start either. You had a very less than ideal start in life. So all I can say is wow. So that's cool.
Is it Joe Rogan style?
No, I would say it's Samantha Postman style, as it should be. And where you take it from here, well, I don't know, but you're going to take it somewhere. I can tell that.
I don't know where it's going. I don't sometimes we have these goals, and I'm in this exec world where productivity and goals is like, actually, I'm almost thinking goal is almost becoming a 4-letter word to me. And so I love it, but I hate it. It's
overused.
For sure. I don't know. I know. I just know a lot of people are making a lot of money off of my mind. I make a lot of my friends a lot of money. I just always giving advice to people and helping them out with things. And it's just like, now it's time to focus on helping. Like, I was always helping build other people up in ways. It's not just about money. I was maybe being a little cheeky about that, but like,
I get it.
Yeah, just to succeed. I love helping other people succeed. It gives me great joy to watch people succeed.
Yeah.
Like unbelievable amounts of joy. And but now I think it's also time it cannot be done simultaneously. Can I help others succeed and at the same time succeed myself? And yeah, I'm successful, but I'm talking about a different succeed, I guess. I'm not sure what that all means yet. And I'm not sure, like, I'm open to like people saying, hey, you could do this, because I just don't know what to do with it. When it's our own story, it's so much more clouded. With a client, I'm just like, so clear for me what direction for them to go, or, to steer towards. But with your own stuff, it's just not like that.
No.
If you have anything before you go, like if you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them.
I won't have anything before I go, but I would like to do this again.
Hey, everyone. I'm so glad you joined us today. With us today was Dave Kimbell, and we unpacked a lot of great nuggets. And I'm sure, oh my gosh, there were tears, there were laughing, there was silence, there was not a lot of silence on my part, unfortunately, but hopefully you're here for the show because you don't mind that part. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. Truly, I was honored that you reached out and wanted to talk to me. Honored that you stayed and listened. Spin was a really good listener. And honored to learn a little bit about you, about your background. And I can definitely tell that you're a thinker too. And it's just magical when you get to meet another thinker. And something I really appreciated you is how open you were to listening to some new ideas. It was obvious that some of them were somewhat newer to you. You asked good questions.
And I've got to unpack some of the answers.
Yeah, and you'll get the transcript later, so you can like relook all over them again and go, oh my gosh, I didn't even know we talked about all that stuff.
Yeah.
So again, thank you again for being on the show. Really, really appreciate it.
This has been an incredible privilege and pleasure. Thanks very much.
Oh, thanks, Dave. So for those of you who are listening, if you've got some comments and something that we touched on that Dave and I talked about today, and you feel the need to reach out, feel free to reach out to us. And even if we don't respond, your articulation is going to be therapy. The fact that you took the time to articulate your thoughts and your feelings and your response is therapy. And it's meaningful. So I want you to know that there's power in that and power for you. And Dave may respond. I don't know. That's up to Dave. But definitely in the comments, if you have an opportunity to comment, give us a rating, let us know how you feel about what's talked about. And yeah, tell people about it. So, because there are some nuggets that we talked about today, and we're not going to change the world if it doesn't go any further. So if you want to help change the world, improve the world, then please feel free to please share nuggets that you heard on the show, or share the show over. So again, thanks again, Dave.
You betcha. Thanks a lot.
Well, that's it for today's show. We covered quite a bit with Dave today. Wow. It's pretty cool how you get this collective intelligence when you have this meeting of the minds. I'd like to thank Dave for being with us today. We sure learned a lot. I learned a lot, and I was able to articulate some things I wasn't sure how to put out there. So thanks, Dave, for being on our show today. And thanks everyone for joining us today. On our next podcast, we're going to be talking to Dave Kimbell again. And I just want to give you a little teaser about what's to come. It's quite a bit different than what we've been talking about with Dave. I didn't actually know I was going to share this. In our next episode, I get really deep and personal. We talk about how curiosity and resilience is a superpower for having an extraordinary life, no matter the trauma that's set to you. And in that, I share a really deep story about meeting my half-sister about halfway through life, someone who had a drug addiction. And I talk about our story of meeting, what that was like to meet someone that I didn't actually know until I was quite a bit older that even existed. And I promise you it's worth your time to listen to. And at the end of the next show, I will be talking about what it's like to live with someone and support someone who's living with an addiction. And in that, I'll talk about some coping mechanisms, as well as if you are that one who's going through an addiction, you may also benefit from, honestly, you are going to benefit from hearing our next show. So I hope to catch you there. Again, thanks for tuning in today. I'm Samantha Postman.
Thanks for listening to Bold Perspectives with Samantha Postman. We'd love to hear which insights added value to your life or the lives of others. To help support the podcast, please share the love on social media, leave a rating or a review. If you don't want to miss out on exclusive content, sign up for her personal email letters. Check out Samantha's website at samanthapostman.com. Follow her on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. Thanks for your amazing support. We'll see you again. And remember, you are meant to live a better and bolder life.